There are 5 basic stages of sleep that we cycle throughout the night. Stage 1 lasts about 5 minutes. During this transition stage, brainwaves become slower and irregular. In some cases, we may also experience hypnagogic images. Stage 2 lasts around 10 to 20 minutes. We have irregular EEG and spindles. Also, K-complexes appear. Less than 50% of sleep time is spent in this stage. Stage 3 is a short transition phase of slow wave sleep made up of 20 to 50% delta waves. Stage 4 runs 15 to 30 minutes. In this stage, we have less than 50% delta waves. Stage 4 represents deep restorative sleep. We spend about 30 minutes the first time we hit this stage, with less time spent here as night progresses. Then we cycle back into stage 3 and 2 before entering stage 5, REM. This lasts about 10 to 20 minutes and we have an irregular EEG, increased heart rate, respiration, and brain activity. This is the stage where dreams occur, and time spent in each REM cycle tends to increase as the night progresses. We then move back into stage 2, 3, 4, and repeat the approximately 90-minute cycle about 5 times during the course of the night. Did you follow all that? Good. But how much sleep do we really need to stay healthy?
The sleep itself is divided into REM and non-REM sleep, and the neurophysiology of these two states is also quite different. The real mystery is why we have REM sleep and what determines REM sleep, and why when we do without REM sleep, which can be eliminated in a few different ways by drugs or by brain damage, there seems to be actually very little effect on behavior. So why do we have this state? And almost all mammals have this state, and yet when it's eliminated, it doesn't seem to produce symptoms. The sleep need is highest as you're younger, and then decreases and levels out in your 20s and 30s. But for people, I'd say mid-20s and up, the optimal amount of sleep, predicting the greatest likelihood that you'll be alive in 5 years in this initial study, and similar results in subsequent studies, is 7 hours. This is a reported sleep time of 7 hours. But people who sleep a lot more than 7 hours are actually at substantially greater risk. So people who sleep 10, 11 hours, their likelihood of being alive in 5 years is less. So this is described as a U-shaped curve, but the greatest effect of sleep on longevity actually occurs for longer sleep times.
Sleep deprivation has a huge impact on our ability to learn and form memories in 2 very critical ways. Everyone knows how it feels when you don't get enough sleep. You wake up for an early morning lecture after only a few hours of shut-eye. Exhausted, you do your best to stay alert and engaged, but you keep nodding off, missing chunks of the lecture. When we're tired, our ability to focus and pay attention is seriously impaired, making it difficult for our brains to receive new information. Studies conducted at Harvard Medical School and Trent University in Canada found that students who were well-rested consistently showed marked improvement in learning a new skill over students who were sleep-deprived. It seems like common sense to get a good night's sleep before a lecture, but what about after? Our need for sleep isn't limited to the school week. For students who study hard during the week but enjoy late-night partying on the weekend, an experiment by Carlisle Smith at Trent University may be of interest. For the study, students were taught a complex logic game, which they were then tested on after various amounts of sleep. Students deprived of sleep showed up to a 30% learning deficit compared to students who had adequate sleep. Interestingly, losing sleep 3 days after learning the logic game still created a 30% learning deficit. What Dr. Smith found was that if you stay out late on a Friday night, you can lose 30% of what you learned in classes on Wednesday. So much for all the hard work you did during the week.
From sleep disorders seldom get enough sleep to stay alert and focused during the day. While a good night's sleep can regulate your mood and help you cope with the next day's emotional challenges, sleep deprivation does the opposite by increasing activity in part of the brain most closely connected to depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric disorders.
We don't understand the function of sleep. We do know that there's some disorders during sleep that can be devastating. Probably the best understood one is called sleep apnea, where we're unable to breathe during sleep. You arouse, you take a couple of breaths, you go back to sleep, and again you're unable to breathe. People with sleep apnea can actually develop brain damage because they get hypoxic during sleep.
People suffering from sleep apnea have trouble breathing while they sleep because their breathing passages are blocked. Milder cases of sleep apnea can be treated by losing weight and quitting smoking. For more severe cases, a continuous positive airway pressure or CPAP machine is used. A mask blows continuous air into the nasal passages, which prevents blockage. The most common sleep disorder is insomnia. Characterized as the inability to get a good night's sleep, people who suffer from insomnia often have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. There are many contributing causes to insomnia, including stress, anxiety, diet, and behavior. Sleeping pills are often used to treat insomnia, but they may not be the best choice.
A current thing that I'm quite concerned about is there is this idea that if you don't sleep enough, it's going to shorten your lifespan, and this causes people to take benzodiazepines, which is the standard hypnotic medication that sleeping pills, almost all of them are benzodiazepines. And the chronic consumption of benzodiazepines, I mean people who take it every day or most days, which is how about half of these pills get taken, chronic use of benzodiazepines does in fact shorten your lifespan significantly.
Insomnia is best treated with psychotherapy and behavior modification, like reducing caffeine and alcohol consumption and increasing exercise. Narcolepsy is a potentially dangerous disorder characterized by sudden sleep attacks in which a person may unexpectedly slip into REM sleep during the day. These REM episodes may be triggered by strong emotions. Narcoleptics may also experience overwhelming daytime sleepiness, causing the person to fall asleep at inappropriate times. Narcolepsy is a chronic neurological disorder caused by the imbalance of a certain hormone in the brain associated with sleep.
The non-pharmacological treatments, which are actually quite effective if they can be done, is simply to encourage people to take naps. If a narcoleptic takes a nap for half an hour, they will be refreshed and be able to function for the next hour or two. Trouble is they'll have to take another nap. Now this is different from some other kind of sleep disorders because people with sleep apnea, almost by definition, if they take a nap, they wake up and they feel worse than when they went to sleep. So there are a number of drugs that are effective. One is called modafinil or Provigil. That's a stimulant. Seems to have some dopamine action. Many narcoleptics find this is not strong enough, is the way they would express it. But it's become sort of the first treatment that has been used. Caffeine is also effective. The trouble is having a single coffee in the morning, the way many of us do, is certainly not going to deal with a narcolepsy. You have to drink it throughout the day, and of course there are side effects, but there's side effects from all these medications.
I always was a bit of a go-getter. I finished high school in 3 years. I put myself through college, graduated top of my class, 5 months pregnant, had a baby on my own, which was sort of a new thing in the early 80s. And I had embarked upon starting a career in finance. So I was working East Coast hours on the West Coast and kind of managing all of that and doing well. Then there was almost like a line drawn in the sand when, after having had sort of a strange flu-type illness, in my case, that I think may have been, the trigger for starting my narcolepsy. Over the next 2 or 3 months, The sleepiness that I was experiencing didn't cause me to seek medical help, because as a single mom of a baby that wasn't sleeping very much and working these early hours, East Coast hours on the West Coast, in kind of a stressful, busy career, the sleepiness seemed actually kind of natural. What caused me to actually go to the doctor was that anytime anybody said anything funny, and I happened to work with a couple of other young women who, whenever the boss would leave the office, this one gal in particular was lots of fun and very funny, and she would say something funny, and my head would fall and I would collapse on to my desk, but I would pop back up almost as quickly as I had fallen. It lasted seconds, never more than a minute, particularly in the beginning. And these collapses were quite unusual, they were strange, and I had absolutely no explanation for it. I remember one time that my daughter had said something cute, and I was over at my parents' house, and I fell to the ground, and my dad, being the compassionate one that he was, yelled at me and said, "You got to figure out what that is and get that fixed," because I think it made him so uncomfortable. He just really didn't know how to react to this very strange, very sudden, completely unusual looking response anytime anybody said anything funny. I went to an endocrinologist, and it was funny because as I'm in the office and explaining these collapses to him, he's asking me questions about my sleepiness and my dreaming, and whether I'm experiencing unusual vivid dreaming, and whether I had something that later I learned was called sleep paralysis, where I would wake up in the morning and unable to move. And I answered the questions that he asked, and I had been experiencing all of those things, but I didn't realize that they were really out of the realm of normal. I thought everybody, had that experience. He left the room, went down the hall, and brought the neurologist in, and he again asked me more questions about all of these symptoms and about my nighttime sleep habits. And I left that first office visit with a presumed diagnosis of narcolepsy. They later did a few other tests, and it was confirmed. When I left the doctor's office that day, I had never heard the word narcolepsy. I'd never heard the word cataplexy. And I went home and looked up narcolepsy in my mom's Merck manual, and I had never read 2 paragraphs that described absolutely everything that was going on in my life and made sense of it. So for me, getting the diagnosis was actually quite a relief. It made sense. It was almost, I was a textbook case. I had all of the symptoms. I had all of the symptoms severely, and you could just check them off.
Somnambulism, or sleepwalking, is more common for children than adults. Those who are affected walk or perform other activities while asleep. They may appear awake but are non-responsive and rarely remember their sleepwalking episodes. In children, the cause of sleepwalking is not well understood, but it usually does not indicate any other physical or mental disorder and does not typically require treatment. Precautionary measures should be taken to prevent the sleepwalker from getting hurt, like clearing obstacles, removing dangerous or sharp objects, and keeping doors and windows locked.